days this way. We're gonna talk and laugh our time away.
The Darfur region, the UN Refugee Agency, says armed groups have reportedly killed more than 800 people and thousands have fled their homes. Lisa Schlein reports.
Armed groups reportedly razed nearly 100 shelters for internally displaced people in Darfur and engaged in widespread violence and extensive looting. Refugees arriving in Chad tell harrowing stories of abuse. 20 years ago, fighting between groups loyal to the Sudanese government and rebel groups led to thousands of deaths and millions of displacements. The UN says the renewed violence is raising fears that a similar dynamic might be developing. For NPR News, I'm Lisa Schlein in Geneva.
This is NPR News from Washington. In Central Texas, the city of Wimberly has been named the International Dark Sky Place of the Year. Maya Fawaz of member station KUT reports on the recognition.
Dark Sky International gives this award to places committed to minimizing light pollution for residents and stargazers. Wimberly is located in the Texas Hill Country and is home to about 14,000 people. It's also located between two of Texas's largest and fastest growing cities. Dark Sky International officials say Wimberly has done a great job educating residents and building a community that treasures the night sky. The Central Texas area is popular for camping and hiking, and many parks host stargazing and celestial event parties. The Hays County Parks Department is already preparing for tourists from across the country to come watch the total solar eclipse that will pass through in April. I'm Maya Fawaz in Austin.
U.S. soccer star Megan Rapinoe played her final game last night. It was cut short by injury. The two-time World Cup winner had to withdraw from the National Women's Soccer League final within 3 minutes. The suspected torn Achilles tendon. Her OL Reign team lost, leaving Rapinoe without a league title. She shared her feelings after the match.
Obviously devastating to, go out in a final so early. I know it's my last game and that is, devastating as well, but to go out so early, that also changes things. It takes a sub off the bench and, taking one of your best players off the field is not ideal.
The 38-year-old retired from the U.S. women's national team after her 203rd appearance over the summer. I'm Rory Brown, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Annie E. Casey Foundation, using research and evidence to develop solutions that help families and communities create a brighter future for young people. More information is available at aecf.org.
This is the New Yorker Radio Hour, a co-production of WNSC Studios and the New Yorker.
Welcome to the New Yorker Radio Hour. I'm David Redman. At some point in the past 30-odd years, you may have contemplated saying no to Amazon. Maybe you were worried about the brick-and-mortar stores you grew up with, or maybe you were upset about labor practices in the warehouses, or tactics described as union busting. Or maybe it was just the spectacle of the second richest person in the entire world wearing a cowboy hat to space. Whatever the case, after having these thoughts, you probably went and clicked add to cart anyway. It's Amazon. It's convenient. The prices are low. The selection is wide. The shipping is so fast, sometimes it's uncanny. But what if that's wrong? What if Amazon only seems like the best and singular option because it's squeezed out all the other options?
The FTC's lawsuit alleges that Amazon is now a monopoly, and it's effectively functioning as a gatekeeper, as a key distribution channel that's connecting millions of consumers and thousands of merchants that are dependent on Amazon to reach them.
That's Lena Khan, the chair of the Federal Trade Commission, which has just filed a lawsuit against Amazon. Khan is 34, but before she'd even finished law school, she wrote an influential paper about how to use antitrust law against the company. But what does it mean for us, for consumers, if Amazon really is a monopoly? I talked with Lena Khan. You've been involved in investigating, thinking about Amazon and antitrust for a very long time. And I wonder if there's a historical analogy for Amazon's position in the market now, whether it's in the 19th century or the 20th century.
You're absolutely right that there have been moments over the last century where the United States has similarly confronted monopolies that have captured control over key distribution channels or key arteries.
It has to do with the way I was brought up. My grandfather had 8 children, and since we were a huge big family, we would rent maybe 3 or 4 houses in the hills, and we were led on these picnics by an uncle who was very enthusiastic about going hiking to distant places. So he took all of us, and so some people would go on horses, and some would go in rickshaws, and some walked. And it took us forever to get there. And I remember we were at a waterfall, we'd suddenly get there, and it would be like heaven. Lovely, cooling water, we could all dip ourselves and bathe in it, and then we would find little pools, and we would put all the mangoes to cool in that lovely cold water. And this is the end of the season mango. It's not your eating mango, it's your sucking mango. I don't know if you've had a sucking mango.
No, what is that?
Oh, a sucking mango is a smaller mango, and you squish it around inside, on all sides. You squish, 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 squish. And then you take the top off, where it's attached to that stem, that part you pull off, then you put it in your mouth, and you squeeze. And what you get is juice. Lovely old juice.
I'm jealous. And I'm not usually a jealous person at all, but I'm jealous. So let's talk a little bit more about food. You said that at school you'd have Syrian Christians, you had a Jain girl from Rajasthan, and she was the one who brought the boiled potatoes,
yes,
the newspaper packet.
Yes.
So explain that food, because it's so far from my kids' experiences in school.
Okay, now we are talking about different schools. We're not in the convent anymore. Okay. We are in another missionary school. And in this school, at lunchtime, we were Hindu girls, Muslim girls, girls of all faiths. And we would go out into the garden in the back of the school, which had been built on a graveyard, apparently. And we would set up our little containers of food. And everybody wanted to eat somebody else's food because they were tired of their own food. So the Muslim girls might bring delicious goat meat cooked with spinach and cardamom, and absolutely yummy, yummy, yummy. And in the winter they would heat it up on a little stove so the congealed fat melted. And we would eat it with Indian breads. Or there was a Jain girl who brought a simple boiled potato. And she would peel it very lovingly, mash it up, and then she would open a little paper packet of spices and pour it all over the boiled potato and eat that with bread. And my God, it was so delicious. It was so yummy because I don't know what those spices were, but they really, you couldn't stop eating them. And then there were the Punjabi girls who would bring a special Punjabi pickle, always slightly sweet and slightly sour and very mustardy, which we just loved. So we would sit and have this meal together and tell our stories to each other as we sat in the old, what was the graveyard, and have our lunch every day.
This is Mill Street Radio. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is Madhur Jaffrey. Coming up, Madhur tells us about a few of her favorite foods and the joys of chewing on bones. That's up right after the break.
Support comes from Matinee Music House Cincinnati, presenter of classical recitals for more than a century. Flutist Jasmine Choi performs Sunday, November 19th at 3 p.m. at Westwood Presbyterian on Harrison Avenue. A former principal flute of the Vienna Symphony and associate principal of the Cincinnati Symphony, she has performed internationally as a soloist and recitalist. For details, visit matineemusichouseCincinnati.org.
Support comes from I1 Unique Eyewear, a local independent optical shop with classic styles in tortoise to distinctive shapes in a kaleidoscope of colors, celebrating over 20 years on Hyde Park Square. Also in Dayton at the shops of Oakwood. I-1.com. I1 Unique Eyewear. Discover great art.
Here's a friendly reminder to you news junkies out there. WBXU can go with you wherever you go so you remain connected to the tri-state community. Of course, we're on air at 91.7 and 88.5, online at WBXU.org, on your phone or tablet with our mobile app, and by asking your smart speaker to play WBXU.
This is Mill Street Radio. Right now, we'll return to my conversation with today's guest, Madhur Jaffrey. She's the author of over 30 cookbooks. This month, she releases the 50th anniversary edition of her very first publication, An Invitation to Indian Cooking. So you end up at the Royal Academy and you start teaching yourself to cook, and you write, I remember eating this kind of see-through slice of roast beef that was gray, cabbage that was watery and gray, potatoes that were watery and gray. Do you think in your experience, did the British in India ever understand anything about the food